Hello, and thank you for joining for this reflection and the Bible passage for today that I've been looking at is from Mark chapter 8, verses 22 to 27, and it's all about the healing of a blind man at Bethsaida. So they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spat on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't go into the village." So the sense, I suppose, in many ways, the significance of this passage, as so often in the Bible, lies in its position and what's happened before, what's happened after. And in the verses before, we find Jesus perhaps sometimes somewhat a little frustrated with the lack of understanding which the disciples show. Is perhaps taking them longer to cotton on to just who Jesus is than he thought might be the case. We've just gone through the second boat incident and the feeding of the 4,000 this time, rather than the 5,000 previously. And I think Jesus is a little bit disappointed about the disciples' perception of what is happening. And he shows his frustration perhaps in earlier in chapter 8, verses 17. "Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear?" So there's definitely some frustration there, isn't there? And our passage today about this man gradually regaining his sight under the healing powers of Jesus perhaps reflects this lack of vision, this very, very slow, gradual development of the disciples' understanding. The healing of the blind man at Bethsaida. And it's interesting, isn't it, that this isn't an instant miracle, an instant healing. And because the man doesn't receive full sight immediately. And he goes through this stage of partial distorted sight. "I see people, but they look like trees walking around," the man said. And Jesus then puts his hands on his eyes, and we get to the point where his sight is restored and he saw everything clearly. So we have to learn to see in some ways, and certainly in a spiritual sense. Even those of us who have fortunate to have our physical vision doesn't mean we can see necessarily clearly in a deeper sense. So I find it an interesting passage. The disciples with their slowly growing understanding, but so much still to learn, which we might well identify with. And, we're in that part of Mark's Gospel. We're moving on to chapter 27, and we're really coming up to a hinge point in the Gospel. And this passage about the man receiving his sight at Bethsaida is critical to it. Really Mark 8, chapter 8, verses 27 to chapter 9, verse 7 is the centre, really, the centre of gravity of Mark's Gospel, a hinge on which everything turns. And this is just prior prior to that, this passage. And so it has this significance, this account of the healing of a blind man at Bethsaida, and this gradual restoration of sight. I see people, they look like trees walking around, but then to a point where he saw everything clearly. And so that's the process that it reflects the process that we're going through in this relationship between Jesus and the disciples. And it's immediately followed in chapter 8, verse 27, with Peter answering Jesus' question, who do people say I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ. So things are moving along, aren't they? And we're getting to this significant section of Mark's Gospel. So, the healing of a blind man at Bethsaida. Thank you for listening.